This revolution is not going away.
This is the Ron Paul Liberty Report with Ron Paul, Daniel McAdams, and Chris Rossini.
We are all ambassadors of the Ron Paul doctrine, and it's so simple. Just tell the truth.
An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Good.
Good.
Let's talk about a very important meeting that just occurred. The world has been saved. The leaders of the free world talking to the leaders of what kind of world? You know, I was going to use the word communist, but they aren't the old-fashioned communists.
No.
It almost looks like they're modified left-wingers or something like that. But anyway, the announcement was great. Trump said, fantastic day with Xi. Trump says China, listen to this, offered to help reopening the Straits of Hormuz. Well, you know, there you go. We have policy. We do these things. Sometimes they backfire. Sometimes they didn't make a lot of sense. And sometimes we get into trouble. So what do? You go to the people you've been trying to hurt and say, hey, please help us.
Yeah.
Please help us. We need you to help us get the straits open because, everybody needs this. And Iran, since they're winning this thing, they might have a word or two to say about it. So that's where they are. There's a lot of spin about the meeting. There's a lot of intimidations, but I think more intimidations coming from our side than the other side of hidden threats or direct threats on what can happen if they don't do what we tell them. So it's an admission, I think, at times what's going on that our policy has shortcomings, and that evidence is coming through. And it is something that, of course, when you follow a non-interventionist foreign policy, you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. You don't go 7,000 miles and close down a very important waterway that's been open probably throughout all history.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we created a new deal, a new deal, different than the old New Deal, with a new thing that's happening, and yet they're arguing over what to do with it. So, the meeting was worthwhile. I believe strongly in these meetings, but I believe strongly in having more meetings and less bombs and less sanctions and less intimidation than we have to put up with and correct. But I think the most important signal that we get here is really between the lines. We're seeking help from the very people we have provoked.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think this is indicative of a power shift in China's favor. I mean, I think the big question might be, why would Trump go now to China? It's an odd thing to do. He has this crisis in Iran. He may take us back to war again, or active, conflict again with Iran. We're going to have a massive economic problem at home. We're not getting any oil. We're going to run out of oil in a couple of weeks here in the U.S. Gas prices are through the roof. Inflation is through the roof. The housing market is almost in free fall. If you look at some of the recent numbers about homes that are up for sale versus homes that are selling. So you have huge problems everywhere. And it just seems to be an odd time to go to China. It seems to me that the president needs some sort of a win. And China will give him that win, but it will come at a price. Now, we've seen the readout from the Chinese side, from the White House side, is what I should say, about we're going to help with Hormuz. We don't think there should be tolls. China can't get nuclear weapons, etc. We have yet to see the Chinese readout, which I think is important because there could be some serious subtle differences. But the one thing that was very, very clear, and it was brought up even before President Trump got on the plane, is the Taiwan issue. This is no longer up for discussion. And if you actually put on that first clip, we have different articles, but the same topic. China, Xi warns Trump about conflicts in Taiwan if Taiwan isn't handled properly. The Chinese president had stern words for Trump on Taiwan as they met in Beijing on Thursday, warning of potential clashes and even conflicts if the issue isn't, quote, handled properly, as the Chinese state media says. During their summit, the two leaders are aiming to stabilize their trading relationship after last year's trade war. They're also grappling with uncertainty over the U.S. war with Iran. But China made it clear that Taiwan is their top priority in the U.S.-China relationship.
You know, and she warned Trump that there are differences over Taiwan. And, you know, one thing we could do is draw a comparison to how did the United States respond when somebody came thousands of miles away from home and put nuclear weapons 90 miles off our shore when distances were much more important than they are today. They're important, but here we are. Same thing, and they expect us. They expect China to do nothing when they're dealing with Taiwan. And you know, I remember that well. You know, a lot of people remember that. And I remember 2 days later, I was drafted. Maybe it was 3 days or something, but it was the promotion of the draft. Ironically, that it ended up the crisis was over because it was confronted. But we did not walk away from that, and because there was a danger. And why would we expect China to say, "Oh, we don't." We'll tolerate this. They're friendly with us, and yet, then all of a sudden, if you study it, there are differences between the people who live on Taiwan and the ones that live in China. So I think that the fact that she warned Trump of the differences, he ought to pay attention.
Yeah, he should pay attention. Now I'll go to the next one. This is a little bit more about the Taiwan question. A readout posted on X by Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Mao Ning said she stressed to Mr. Trump that, quote, the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations. If it is handled properly, the bilateral relationship will enjoy overall stability. Otherwise, the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts, putting the entire relationship in great jeopardy, is the Foreign Ministry spokesperson. The Post also said she told Trump that, quote, Taiwan independence and cross-strait peace are irreconcilable as fire and water. Safeguarding peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait is the biggest common denominator between China and the U.S. But I think the backdrop to all this, I think what the understanding is now, China has probably now breathed a sigh of relief because China has seen that the much vaunted U.S. military, when confronting Iran, has not been successful. They dropped a lot of bombs, they blew up a lot of stuff, but they did not reach any of their objectives. And so the idea now that the U.S. would go several thousand miles further away and defend Taiwan against China just across the strait is an impossibility. So the fear of a U.S. Attack on China over Taiwan, I think, has diminished significantly, and I think certainly the Chinese understand that now.
And you know, we may not have put soldiers and big weapons in Taiwan, but we've done plenty of assistance to Taiwan.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, okay, let's have a beer and go about and play golf today.
Yeah.
They say that's not going to happen, and they are going to have to settle that one way or the other. But it isn't only the issue like Khrushchev had, you know, putting weapons so close. It's the whole idea of how many ships do we have over there now? It looks like they're moving them, you know, from one potential or opportunity to another opportunity, and the whole idea that we want to show our strength. Why don't we show strength and liberty and cooperation? So, but when you start off like this, then if you don't go along with it, you know, the opposites say, "Oh, you people are so unpatriotic." Here we have this duty to, you know, support our empire, and it's who else is going to get rid of all these communists? Well, who is going to get rid of all these left-wing kooky people that are undermining our liberties here at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as usual, our friend Larry Johnson has a good summary of what's going on. And if you go to that next one, Sonar 21 is indispensable. I read it every day, of course. China sent a tough message to Trump. Did he understand it? Now he went through a few things in this article. I won't show all of them. It was about how Trump was not met by Xi himself. When Putin comes, Xi meets him at the airplane. He did not show up. It was a vice premier, et cetera, lower level, and a few other things. It wasn't prominently featured in the Chinese papers, the fact that Trump's visiting. But this is the one that really caught my eye. If you go to that next clip. Before Trump's arrival, the Chinese embassy in Washington published a list of 4 red lines that Washington should not question. These are the Taiwan issue, democracy and human rights in China, the political system, and Beijing's rights to development. And I don't know if this has happened before, but this is basically the Chinese side telling the Americans, reminding them of etiquette. When you come to China, do not bring these things up if you want a successful summit. Don't talk to us. Don't lecture us, as they have done in the past. You know, presidents have gone over there, lecturing them about human rights and other things. Said, don't do it this time. We don't want to hear it. We can talk about other things, but these things are off limits.
So do you think they probably followed those rules that were dictated to them? At least I didn't hear anything where they overstepped the bounds. Obviously, you know, Trump had his comments, but from a viewpoint of not making things much worse,
Yeah.
I would say they haven't done that. But it's persistent. It's the unnecessity of even talking about this, and you know, what do we have on Taiwan, and how many war vessels do we have around there, and why is it that the president of China has to warn us about these things? You know, it's just as a condition that can go haywire, and that's the way a lot of wars get started. You know, sometimes they are deliberately promised and planned, but I think there's a lot of planning that having persistent enemies is very well known. When you listen to our neocons, I mean, what else can you think of that you know, these things are, you know, whether it comes to Taiwan or starting to talk about Cuba, you know, how many people demagogue that, and they'd be ready to invade Cuba.
Yeah.
And they probably are critical of Kennedy for not having a war back then.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, here now, and continuing with Larry's piece, is what Xi Jinping, his remarks at their first meeting. Now, Trump, I think, will be there until Friday. They're going to have another meeting on Friday. But this is important because this shows two things. First of all, it shows Chinese confidence. They are, in their perception, at least coming from a position of power. But here's what he said. The basis of relationships between China and the U.S. should be based on mutual benefit. Confrontation will lead to mutual damage. It's necessary to be partners, not rivals. And China and the USA should overcome this Thucydides trap and build a new paradigm of relations. Now, this Thucydides trap, written, of course, by the famous chroniclers of war, essentially points out that the rising power and the power in position of dominance will inevitably clash militarily. So it's clear when he says this that he views China as the rising power, about to perhaps knock the U.S. off of its block as the dominant power. So he's saying basically in this process, which is inevitable, it's important that we don't clash militarily. That's a pretty bold statement if you think about it on the part of the Chinese. I do think they realize now that they are in a position of power, and that the games played last year by President Trump with this trade war and the sanctions war, they're not going to have any of it again.
You know, the other thing that China has done that a lot of people don't talk about, and our administration doesn't talk about, is the basic economic policy of China is not 50 years old. You know, they actually, you know, we buy stuff from China because it's a better deal for us, and we're still allowed to buy stuff to a degree. So they take that money and they invest it. Our people are furious that they actually invested in Africa, you know, and they have, not only their own sources of the precious metals, not the precious metals, but the rare metals,
Rare
the
earths, yeah.
rare earths. They're really in charge. And I think most people recognize this because our government even complains about this. But it's that they didn't waste a lot of money. How many invasions have they made recently? China. I mean, I know that they have a long history. But you take our 100 years, we probably have a record on how many countries we decide to put troops into.
Yeah, you make a good point on the rare earths because that's another point of leverage that the Chinese have. They are the number one producer on Earth of rare earths minerals, which are absolutely critical to the production of U.S. military equipment. And we've shot off all of our missiles in these two foolish attacks on Iran last June and starting in February. The stockpiles are, we talked about it yesterday, severely degraded, despite what Pete Hegseth may claim. They cannot be rebuilt without Chinese cooperation. Now, if you're the Chinese, you've got purchasers of these rare earth metals throughout the world. It's a global supply chain of these. Would you be that interested in selling these materials to a country that's making weapons to eventually attack you? No, you wouldn't. So China has the upper hand. They want to make sure that this relationship changes, that the threat of a confrontation is gone before they deliver the rare earths metals.
And with all this economic planning with tariffs and sanctions, they place way too much and wrongly directed this issue of balance of trade, because it's not quite as important. Because if we buy more stuff than they buy, they say, "Oh, that's bad. We should keep up with it." Well, what are the Chinese going to do with our money?
Yeah.
They have to buy it somewhere. Well, I think they've shrewdly have invested it in different places, but the dollars don't evaporate either. But this is a big thing that they think that they were going to, change is the balance of trade, and it has in some parts of the world. But it's a number they look at and overly emphasize because the market's pretty good if you just leave it alone on who should buy what. Some people who say, "Oh no, we can't have a balance of trade. We can't be buying all this stuff." But the best example to use on that is, what if the states decided to do that? What if the states were treated like individual countries? Who cares about the balance of trade between Texas and Chicago?
Yeah.
It would. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's something very interesting that happened while President Trump was dining with Xi Jinping. If you go to that next clip, very clever on the part of Iran and China. Iran proclaims safe toll-free passage for 30 Chinese tankers amid Xi-Trump summit. So Iran waited until President Trump was sitting down with Xi Jinping to give the green light for 30 Chinese tankers. It's a huge gift to China. It reinforces the strategic relationship between China and Iran. It's a black eye and a bloody nose to Washington. And here's the kicker, Dr. Paul. The U.S. can do not a thing about it. Are they going to send the U.S. Navy to interdict those ships while President Trump is sitting in Beijing? Are they going to blow up these ships? Are they going to do something against these Chinese tankers? Of course not. So essentially, from my reading of it, it does a couple of things. First of all, it does those two things, but it also, the fact that China has talked with Iran, has made an agreement with Iran to get these ships out, also reinforces the idea that Iran is in control of the Strait of Hormuz. And that's an important psychological point to make while President Trump sits in Beijing.
No, and that's where the real challenge is because people know the character and personality of the president, and you can almost speak for him when things like this happen. But who knows? One thing for sure, if you don't know exactly and it doesn't come to fruition, he'll change his mind.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Maybe we can get in on this someday. But what I was surprised about is that the 30 ships. I mean, it wasn't like they sent a couple of little, motorboats through and test it. But 30 ships, and they got that would tide a few countries over. Maybe they'll send some of that oil to Cuba. Wouldn't that be an irony?
It would be, it would be for sure. But you're right. I mean, 30 ships is a lot. You can see them. I think that's also making the point. We control it. We can let these ships through. Now, if you go to that second clip, following this, Thursday saw Iranian state media proclaim that some 30 Chinese vessels are being allowed safe passage. Bloomberg also reports that vessels were allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz with the coordination of Iranian authorities and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, state TV reports, citing an IRGC official. Well, it's yet unknown or unclear whether the U.S. Navy side of the de facto blockade will also let them pass. I've got $10 that says they will. Reuters says Iran has begun allowing some Chinese vessels to transit through the Strait of Hormuz following an understanding over Iranian management protocols of the waterway. Now, I think that's important too, as I just mentioned. That reaffirms Chinese control, Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz. It reinforces it. So I think this is a big event that's happening in a very clever way as Trump uncomfortably sits there in Beijing.
And, if the conditions don't continue to move in the direction that we're talking about, you're also going to see the strengthening of the triad, with China and with Russia and Iran. They talk about Iran like they're very capable, and of course they have been in the past, but it's something new that they recognize that they might throw in there India or something like that. But now they're talking about China and Iran being a partnership in this trio.
Yeah, China, Iran, and Russia as a trio. It is an important shift. It's a global shift for sure. Well, I'm going to close out. We're closing out a little early today, but if you put that last clip on, I didn't do it yesterday, but reminding everyone, you need to get some coffee. The Ron Paul Liberty Report Revolution Blend. You can point your phone at that QR code and get some gourmet organic coffee from Munda's Artisan. They're a partner of us with the show, and you will enjoy that coffee. It's delicious. So. And I do want to thank everyone for watching the show today, and I'm going to hand it back over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. In a general way, what we are talking about is a foreign policy quite different than what we have. And what we have is endorsed by both the political parties. And, if it comes to a war, one side of the political spectrum, they start the war, but everybody falls in line. Just look at it. They get the money. No matter how bad this is, they still get the money. And let's find out what the people think. Well, we can test with waters. What do the people think? The American people, they don't say, hey, when are you guys going to invade this country? We're anxious to send our kids over there. No, they don't do that. And a non-interventionist foreign policy, I don't know why more people won't at least consider it rather than using, the demagoguery of saying, if you don't go with us, you're not patriotic and you don't care about the people, you don't care about the troops, all that noise. And the one thing is, I am convinced that if we would work in a direction, because nothing will be achieved through achieving perfection. It doesn't always happen that way. But non-intervention in principle is a good idea, and I can tell you from the experience of many historians and the record is that the freer the trade is, and the founders understood this, the freer the trade is, the richer a country will be. And if you have interventionism, it's an attack on our wealth, and it also means that you lose our liberties. Because right now, I think one of the big things with this stuff going on, the conflict, is the challenge to the First Amendment. And it's terrible what you see on people who out in front say, well, this is what we have to do to save our country. You can't just say anything you want. So I think the two things, non-interventionism and a lot of respect for individual liberty, we go a long way to promoting peace in the world. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Thanks for watching the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Like and subscribe to help spread the message. And until next time, live